to start reading in the book of Philippians chapter 3. And at verse 13 and 14. Am I standing too close? There's a little roar. Have it like that? Thank you very much. Brethren, I count not myself to have arrived. Think on that a minute. I count not myself to have arrived. But this one thing I do. Imagine of all the things you do that you reduce them to one. And you realize how important the one thing is, if that's the only thing you do. This one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind. Must be something bad back there. And reaching forth unto those things which are before, there must be something wonderful ahead. I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. My message today is titled, Don't Park Here. We human beings seemingly are moved by the feeling we should park. Not only ourselves, but our automobiles in places where we should not. For that reason, signs are put up, don't park here, no parking allowed. My driver was about to park our car at a certain place in a certain city, and as he started in, we saw a sign that said, don't even think about parking here. And still we humans park where we should not. I want to bring to you 3 places where we should not park. Number 1, we should not park besides our past with its shortcomings, its failures, its torments, and its bad things. For many of us would like to call back those days so we could do differently. We would like for God to place into our hands the opportunities of yesterday, but he cannot do that. Our past is there. And the Apostle Paul was disturbed by this. His past haunted him. There in prison for the months he was there alone, the thing came up in his mind about his past, how he said, before he met the Lord, I persecuted the church of God. I hailed into prison the new Christians. I put them to death, men, women, and children. And though he knew the Lord now, and was the man who became probably the greatest of the apostles and established more churches and wrote more of our New Testament than anybody, yet down deep in his gut, these things in his past came up before his mind and spirit and eyes. And he cried out about his past until he made a decision, a commitment that I realize I haven't arrived yet. I haven't reached the place with God I should, but I've reduced it all to one thing. And this one thing I do, I'm going to forget. I'm going to take every bad thing I ever did and every bad thing somebody did to me, and I'm going to forget it. And many of us wonder if we can forget, because when we try to forget, these things keep coming up. But he said, yes, we can forget, because he said, forgetting those things which are behind, I reach. Everybody say, I reach.
I reach.
Raise your hand up and reach. Come on, reach. Higher. Higher. One more inch. He said, I reach. toward those things which are before. And so there are better things before. There are far more wonderful things than I've ever had in my past or you've had in your past. And glory to God. God is in our future, and blessings are in our future, and anointing is in our future, and supply of our needs is in our future, and God's wealth is in our future, and every good thing is in our future. But can I reach that high? The other day in the kitchen, Evelyn needed something from up above, and she couldn't reach it, and she got on a little stool and couldn't reach it. She said, "Oral, you're tall. Come over here and reach this." And I reached up, and I couldn't quite reach it. And I just put up my hand just a little more. I touched it with my finger, and I made it jingle and jiggle, and it fell over in my hand. I said, "Here it is, honey." I think God is saying to us, you can reach just a little higher, just a little more. You can go just a little farther. You can get that thing out of your life. My mother had things to say to me when I grew up, and particularly when I began the healing ministry, and the power of God came on me, and the great crowds started coming, and the miracles began happening. Mama is a little Cherokee Indian woman, only 5 feet tall, and I'm a little over 6 feet. And she'd pull me down to her and wet my face with her tears. And she'd say to me, not once, not twice, but scores and even hundreds of times, "Oral, always obey God. Always obey God." I want you to think about always obey God. And then she said, "Stay little in your own eyes." Mama sensed in my spirit that someday I might not obey the Lord, that the more that I met the needs of the people, I would become disobedient, or I'd get the big head. And she said, "Stay little in your own eyes." But I was greatly moved during the period of my ministry, when at the very peak of my ministry. There would be thousands coming to be prayed for, to be healed, and I would tell them that if they could stay in the crusade until the last day, all those I had not gotten to, I'd get to on the last day, no matter how many. And I'd pray for hundreds every night after I'd preached and led many people to the Lord Jesus, until my strength was gone. And then I would dismiss and come back the next day, and then on the last day, there'd often be 8, 9, 10,000 to be prayed for, and I'd line them up in a quarter of a mile long lines, and I'd lay hands on them for hours until everyone had been prayed for. But during those night meetings, say the meetings were 2 weeks or 3 weeks long, like they were in Detroit, I had to quit at a certain time at night when my strength was gone. But people who are sick don't understand that. They think because you're anointed and you have the power of God that you never get tired, but I can tell you that you do. And I would dismiss, because I knew that when I didn't have the strength, my faith was not as strong, and they would hurry me to my room, and I'd get into bed, they'd bring me a bite to eat, and I'd go to sleep so I could get strength for the next night. And people would follow me to my car, take hold of my clothes, and stop me and try to get me to pray for them. And I would always say, "I don't have strength. And when I don't have strength, my faith's not as strong. You'll be disappointed." But people didn't understand that. And that was happening over a long period of time. Until one night it came to a climax, and there was a very large and strong woman came up behind me, took hold of my clothes, and just whirled me around. And she said, Brother Roberts, I came a long distance. I'm out of money. I've got to go home tomorrow, and I'm so sick. I want you to pray for me. I said, Sister, I don't have the strength. She said, I don't know about that, but I got to be prayed for tonight. I got to leave tomorrow. Tonight, and anger just flew all over me. It wasn't the first time I'd been angry. I developed a spirit of anger that was growing all the time because I couldn't understand why the people couldn't understand. I didn't understand when you're sick. That's hard for you to understand anything except you want to get well. And out of my anger, I just threw my hand out toward her and said, Heal her, Lord. And to my surprise, he did. When I got to my room and lay down, I heard that still small voice inside me say, I healed her all right, but you won't get any credit for it. And then the Lord said to me, remember Moses? And I knew what he meant. For when the Israelites were being led by Moses across the wilderness and they ran out of water, God said to Moses, speak to that big rock and command water to come out. But Moses by this time was angry with the people. He had lost patience with them. They didn't understand. And he didn't speak. He took the rod and he smote it. The water came out all right. But God said to him, when you've led these people through the desert and the wilderness to the promised land, and you stand on the mountain and you are given a vision of the whole thing, and you'll want to go over crossing the Jordan River with the children of Israel, I shall not let you do that. Because you have done what you've done, you've lost patience with my people, you've given into your anger, you will not step your foot on the promised land. And Moses died, and God buried him. And Joshua, his young protege, had to take over and lead them across the Jordan into the promised land. And it really shook me up because I realized if I continued in this anger, I might lose my own soul someday. And I was parking by my anger, and God was saying, don't park here. You may have some kind of feeling like this, maybe that or something else that has to do with people, but God will not let you turn against people. He created people. They're in his image. His son died for every one of us, and he will not let us carry anger toward people. Number two, don't park beside your success or your achievements or the things that you have accomplished. As I said, my mother sensed that I would get the big head. Once she came in the early days of my healing crusades and saw the big crowds and all, and she and Papa sat in the back and didn't let me know they were there. And before I was born, while she was pregnant with me, the last of 5 children, she had asked God for a preacher's son. And since she was Indian, all the other children had brown eyes. And she said, Lord, I want my last son to have dark black hair. It's not so black now, but it was black once. And I want him to be blue-eyed. I don't have any blue-eyed children. And I want him to preach the gospel. And I vow to you that I'll give you this child. Well, when I was born, she had the preachers lay their hands on me. And she raised me up, teaching me that someday I would take his message of deliverance to my generation. And eventually I rebelled against that, left home, and came back home with tuberculosis and almost died. And in that experience, I got saved and got healed and felt the call to preach, and I've been going ever since. But my mother, sitting back in that crowd, she was wanting to know about me. And she said, God, is this what you meant when you gave me a preacher boy. He said, this is what I meant for him to be. And the next day, she let me know she was in the city, she and Papa, and called me to their room, and she told me what I've just shared with you. It means a lot to me today that my mother recognized that I was now doing what she vowed to God that I would do when she gave me birth. And the Lord just will not let us be sold on ourselves. He will not let us get the big head, because if we do, pride goeth before a fall, and a haughty spirit before destruction. I have a very, very good friend of mine. I've had him for 40 years as a friend. And almost everywhere I go to preach, he shows up. And he just talks about what's going on, the power of God falling and everything, but he never compliments me. He never tells me I preach well. He never says anything like that at all. He always says the same thing. Every time he says, Oral, you can do better. Oral, you can do better. And that's what God is saying to every one of us. We've not arrived yet. We can do better. Number 3, don't park beside your giving. One of the saddest times of Evelyn's and my life and my children was during the first 12 years of my ministry before I began the healing ministry, when as a young man, going to college, pastoring small churches, conducting little bitty revivals in churches of 50 to 100 people, traveling in my area there in Oklahoma. During that time, I'd been taught to be a tither, to give my tithes and offerings, to give 10% of all I earned, which wasn't much. In those days, people taught you to tithe, but they didn't teach you to receive. And eventually, we were called to a church in Enid, Oklahoma. And I always went to a place where they had universities, and I'd enrolled, and I started preaching the church and wondered where I would live, because I didn't have the money to rent or to buy. And usually a church has a parsonage or a place for the pastor, and they didn't have one. And no one seemed to be upset about it. And I really had no place to take my wife and children, until a member of the church came and said, well, hey, come and stay with us a few weeks. They had a little 2-bedroom house with their children, and we came with our children, and there were 9 in that house, in those 2 little bedrooms. And in the second month, with 2 women there, things got a little tough. And one day Evan said to me, Oral, if you don't get a place for me and these children to live, I'm going to take them home to Mama, and I'm not coming back until you find us a place to live. And I said, Evan, you wouldn't do that. She said, you just watch me. That was prayer meeting night, and believe me, when I went to preach that night, I was anointed. I got up and preached like a man from another world. And while I was preaching, that still small voice inside me said, why don't you start the offering for a down payment for a parsonage? Why don't you just give your week's salary? They had just given me the week's check, the check for the past week, $55. That was what we were trying to live on. And why don't you just put it on the mourner's bench out there and then ask the people what they'd like to give? And at first my heart just almost dropped out of my body, because I'd never given my week's salary. I'd always given the 10th. And we went all those years without expecting to receive anything back, and sure enough, we didn't. I mean, we just couldn't get ahead. We couldn't even get even. We had $300 worth of furniture in our house. after we got in the new parsonage. If you put your elbow on the dining room table, it would fall over right towards you. Our old car was battered up. Well, anyway, I preached that night, and I went out there and laid the $55 check on the motor's bench and asked who would like to help. And before then, I couldn't get their attention. They wouldn't do anything. And to my surprise, they jumped up all over that little church building and said, I'll give. And here they came forward with their $100 and $200. One man came with $1,000. And we had our down payment. And I went home, and Evan said, how was the service? And I said, it was just great, Evan. I got the down payment. You won't have to take the children home to Mama. And she said, how much did you give? And I said, well, honey, I gave the best I could. She said, how much did you give? I said, honey, I gave our week's salary. She said, you didn't? And I said, I did. She said, how am I going to buy groceries Saturday to feed these children? I said, honey, I don't know, but I obeyed the Lord, and we're going to have a place to live. It was a cold winter night in Oklahoma. We went to bed. That was the coldest bed I ever slept in. You could have driven a truck between her and me. About 4 o'clock the next morning while we were asleep, there was a loud knock at the door. I went and opened it, and there was a man, a member of the church, who was a big wheat farmer whose name was Art Newfield. And he said, Brother Oral, I'm sorry to wake you up at 4 o'clock in the morning, but I was there tonight. I didn't give anything. I went back to my farm, went to bed, couldn't sleep. About a half hour ago, I woke up, and I went out in the yard, and I dug this up, and he handed me 4 $100 bills. Now, you think I'd never held a $100 bill in my hand in my life. And he said something I'd never heard. Something that changed my life forever. Something that is changed, that is now changing the body of Christ. Art Newfield said to me, Brother Oral, these $400 bills are not just money. He said, they're seed. He said, I'm a farmer, and quite a large farmer, and I'm in trouble. I've been playing the stock market, and I'm about to lose everything I've got. I'm about to lose my farm. I've not been close to God, and I didn't come to the church until you came as pastor, and I came to see if I could get restored. And tonight, the Lord told me what to do. And I brought you these 4 $100 bills, but it's not just money, it's seed. He said, I have to plant seed to get a crop, to get a harvest. If I don't plant seed first, I don't raise anything. I don't get anything. If I don't plant seed, I'm going to lose my farm. And he said, this is seed to save my farm, to change my life. And it went through me. I'd been raised on the farm the first 14 years of my life and helped my father plant seed, and I knew from a natural point of view that's what you do when you raise corn or cotton or wheat or tomatoes or onions or peas or beans in your garden or flowers in your yard, or if you have a child, the male seed has to go into the woman's body. Everything began with a seed. When you read the book of Genesis, where everything began, you read about where God gave the seed for all kinds of living things, including the offspring and the generations to come. And the seed has been the central part of the human race. And 9 generations after Adam, The human race had gone away from God, and their violence had reached heaven, and God repented. He had made man, and he only found one family who was righteous, and that was Noah and his wife and 3 sons and their wives. And he had them to build a great boat, an ark, they called it, and to call in 2 of every living thing. And then he said, I'm going to send a flood and wipe the whole human race out except you. And the floods came 40 days and nights, and while it was coming down, the boat was rising up, and they were up above it. And it covered the highest mountain in the world, 29,000 feet. And then it came down after the waters receded, and when it came down and Noah came out of the ark, the first thing that God said to Noah for the new race of people, which is you and me, he said, as long as earth remains, does earth remain? As long as earth remains, there shall be seed time and harvest. Everybody say it. Seed time and harvest. Say it twice more. Seed time and harvest. Seed time and harvest. Which comes first? Seed. You plant your seed first. And there he was talking to me like that. And we had been giving, we had been doing, but we hadn't thought of it as a seed. We hadn't thought of it in its spiritual connotation, that it referred to everything about your life, your soul, your mind, your body, your material life, your time on this earth. And it changed our thinking. And we began to give with a whole new spirit. That from that moment, our tithe was not a debt we owed, but a seed we sowed. They had beat into us. If we didn't give our tithe, we were robbing God, and a curse was coming on us, and we were scared to death not to tithe. And there was where God said, I'll open the windows of heaven. I'll pour you out a blessing where there's not even room enough to receive it, and I'll rebuke the devourers for your sake. But that was not emphasized. That part did not come into our spirit. The only part that came in, we're robbing God, we'll be cursed if we don't do this. So we would give, and we didn't expect to receive, and God sent it, but we didn't recognize it, and He passed us by. And let me tell you, when you give, if you're expecting, you'll see it. You'll recognize it. You'll receive it. But if you're not looking for it, it'll come. God will send it. God is faithful. God will not lie. But it'll pass you by. Your miracle will pass you by. And millions of Christians every day have miracles passing them by, passing them by. They've been giving, but they know nothing about receiving. They've been planting their seed, but they know nothing about reaping. Now look at Philippians again. Look in the 4th chapter. I hope you will let me take my time this morning, because this is this first time I've been here, folks. You know, I've got a lot in my heart today. In fact, a little later I'm going to tell you what God said to me last night and confirmed this morning to share with you. I want you to look at the 4th chapter, beginning at verse 10, and visualize yourself in a lonely prison cell, not like prisons today as bad as ours are, but far worse. Terrible food, if any. No warm clothes. It was a terrible thing to be in prison by the Roman government standards. Verse 10, but I rejoiced in the Lord greatly, Paul says. He has now written a letter that has been sent back to the church at Philippi. The church that is more like us than any church, the book in the Bible that's more like us than any book in the Bible. It's really our book. Now think of him writing this and then having it read. Like I'm speaking today, having a man stand up in front of the church and reading this to them. But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at the last your care of me hath flourished again. I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at the last your care of me has flourished again. It's evident that the care had been there, but now it wasn't there. And then he says, wherein you were all so careful, but you lacked opportunity. Now, what does he mean? It meant that Paul was traveling all the time, and they didn't know where he was all the time. They had sought opportunity to send to him, to give and to send to the man of God, but they couldn't find him very often. But last they have found him. And they have done something about it. Verse 11, not that I speak in respect of want, for I've learned, notice that I've learned, not the way God had planned it. He just said, I've learned, in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. I know both how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I'm instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to suffer, both to abound and to suffer need. He knew what to do when he had plenty and when he had nothing. And here's the answer. I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. And again I ask, what does he mean? He is saying this. God is my source. If I have much or if I have little, God is my source. I'm not looking to people. I'm not trusting people. I'm trusting God, and God's going to fix it for me. God's going to fix it for me. I'm looking to God because he's going to strengthen me. When I'm hungry, he's going to strengthen me with food. When I'm cold, he's going to warm me with clothes. Now listen to this. Verse 14, notwithstanding, in other words, however, ye have well done that you did communicate with my affliction or with my need. Now you Philippians know also that in the beginning of the gospel, when I departed from Macedonia, that's where Philippi was, no church communicated with me. Of all the churches he established, not one, except these, communicated with me concerning giving and receiving, but you only. You're the only ones who tried to find out where I was and to bring me your giving to the Lord's work and to me, his servant. You're the only ones who communicated. Now, men and women, look at me a minute. I'm up here trying to communicate with you. But if you don't understand what I'm saying, then I fail to communicate. Communication is not only in Oral Roberts today, communication is in you. Whether or not you're being communicated with, when I'm here or Bishop Butler's here or some other man or woman of God is here, communication is in you. And it is said you have to hear it 7 times to hear it once. That's why I think a pastor should preach a sermon 7 times before he stops. Preaching it once just won't get the job done because you can't hear it. He says, only you communicate with me as concerning what? 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 You mean he didn't say concerning giving and stop? Did he go on to something else? Concerning giving and receiving. Say it like that, giving and receiving. Giving is one thing, receiving is another. Everybody breathe out. Hold it. Now breathe in. Breathe out again. Breathe in. That's giving by breathing out. That's receiving by breathing in. And God made you to give and receive. God made you to breathe out and breathe in. If you don't breathe out and breathe in, you're going to die. If you don't get into giving and receiving, you're going to die. You're going to be a pitiful representative of Jesus Christ. You're going to be down on yourself, lose your self-esteem, live in whatever comes along, drive whatever old wreck of a car that you can get your hands on, no money to pay your bills, somebody evicting you, casting you out. I know what I'm talking about because I've been there. I've lived in little old shacks with dirt floors with my wife and children. I haven't had enough clothes to look decent in the pulpit, and the people out there was just like me or worse because I didn't know how to preach giving and receiving because they had not taught it to me. Therefore, I had not taught it to them. And if the preacher does not prosper, his people cannot prosper. He said, for even in Thessalonica you sent once and again unto my necessity, not because I desire a gift. He didn't run around just wanting something all the time. That wasn't his spirit. But I desire fruit that may abound to your account. He said, I'm thinking about you all the time. When I ask you to give, I want you to receive that you may have fruit that will abound, that will overflow to your account, that you'll have enough money in the bank you can write the check that you need to write and it'll cash.